Maria, what is the collective memory that Mr. Putin has other than Crimea, where, let's be blunt, he was successful? Is it a sum of memories for Putin, or is it just, I did it in Crimea, I can do it in eastern Ukraine?
Well, you know, if he's thinking, I did it in Crimea, I can do it again in Ukraine, there's one big important thing that he may be forgetting or not factoring here, and that is, since the annexation of Crimea, there is this fervent national sentiment in Ukraine that this is a country that they want to protect and they want to really push away from the Russian sphere of influence. If you ask me, and this is the reporting that we've done behind the scenes, also speaking to Ukrainian officials, to me it's crystal clear that Ukraine will fight, they will put up a fight, and the country right now is really prepping for war, and they believe that this is something they want to do. Ukraine tried 5 times in its history to separate and break away from Russia. They were able to do it after the Berlin Wall, and they know that this time around they will fight again. And sometimes I do wonder if this is something that we are not factoring enough in the conversation. Ukrainians will fight in this war.
How do the French and the Germans respond to the idea that Mr. Putin would put in a new government in Kiev?
Well, you know, that's the big point and the big question right now, that Paris and Berlin are not on the same page, and that's why there's a meeting tomorrow, by the way, between Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz happening in Berlin. What I would say, however, is that this really is decision time for Germany. We know that whether there's an invasion that's military, or whether we see cyber hacking or any other form of political destabilization happening in Ukraine, the Germans are going to have to finally make a decision. They didn't do it for 10 years under Angela Merkel, and in fact, many would now tell you the issues that we're seeing right now, it's the failure of the politic of appeasement that Angela Merkel carried out for 10 years.
Emily, from the United States' standpoint, what's the main motivation for being involved, for having red lines, for really countering Russia if that red line of invading Ukraine is crossed?
I mean, the U.S. is actually, the conversation in Washington right now is more about what the U.S. needs to be doing before that line is crossed. If the U.S. should be either putting forward troops and sending more assistance, sending more weapons, already beginning sanctions, not waiting for Putin to make the first move, but showing that the U.S. is willing to act by starting that action. I mean, you heard from Senator Chris Coons in that early clip that he's a Democrat, but you've also heard similar sentiments from Republicans. Last week, before they broke for recess, they were talking about having legislation, moving forward a package that could contain potential sanctions and how they would get the bipartisan support for that. You've seen the House also take an interest in that. The only thing now is that they're gone for this week. They're back in their districts. They're talking with their constituents. They're not in Washington getting something done, which means that if Putin moves within the next week, the U.S. might wind up being caught flat-footed.
But Emily, what's the main motivation for this administration? Is it to fortify the alliance with Europe? Is it to fortify access to certain precious resources, whether it's natural gas or whether it's lithium, which is in the region? Or is it to counter this nexus of China and Russia that seems to be increasingly close as they try to go after the same resources?
I mean, Lisa, I think you've nailed hit the nail on the head in all of those instances. These are all things that are really motivating the U.S., as well as just simply standing up for other democracies, trying to limit Russia's influence in various sectors of the world, and trying to send a signal to countries such as China that, hey, if you try to invade other democracies, we will stand up, there will be a response, and it's not something the U.S. is just going to sit back and let happen.